Many of my Twin Peaks Conversations guests have been people that I've spoken to before, but none of them go back as far as Cameron Cloutier, host of the YouTube channel Obnoxious and Anonymous, and, as you'll soon discover in detail, if you haven't already, director of the wildly ambitious fan film Queen of Hearts, which tells the story of Annie Blackburn after we last spent any substantial time with her in the Season 2 finale. Expanding greatly on details from Firewalk with Me, The Missing Pieces, and the final dossier in creative and compelling fashion, the complete project runs over 4 hours, although it's been released publicly on YouTube both in 5 shorter acts and in one long upload. After this intro and before the audio-only conversation begins, I'll play a short teaser for the film, so make sure you watch before you listen. Cameron and I first talked in June 2014, almost exactly 8 years ago. I had commented on some of his videos and he invited me on as a guest, and in fact, although I'd published written transcriptions of interviews in the past, this marked my very first foray into the audio format or any sort of podcasting at all. I'd appear on Obnoxious and Anonymous for various group and one-on-one discussions over the years, as we anticipated and then unraveled Season 3 while it aired. Our last extended conversation, this time published by me in a print format, was several years ago, when Cameron was first planning to shoot Queen of Hearts. At that point, he thought the movie might premiere in late 2018, but life and the world had other plans. Now the journey is complete. The last installment of Queen of Hearts came out a few weeks ago. As always, this conversation will be split between YouTube for the public and Patreon for the $5 a month tier. But this is probably the longest conversation yet, touching on not only Cameron's film, but his background, his other interests, and of course, lots of Twin Peaks topics. The public part will be longer than usual, a full hour, and the Patreon material will be an unusually massive bonus, about 2.5 additional hours exclusive to the top tier. Before the discussion begins, a quick update on my own work since the last Twin Peaks Conversations a month ago. I've continued my Season 3 coverage on the Lost in Twin Peaks podcast, publicly releasing material that I recorded for patrons years ago. Now it's in a new format, it's free, and it comes complete with illustrated companions that break down the various elements discussed in these short daily podcasts. I do a week's worth for each episode. I'm about to conclude the week that I spent on Part 8, which unusually incorporates a couple guests, Em and Steve from the No Ship Network podcast Sparkwood in 21. We'll take a week off, as did the series in 2017, before I resume with Part 9 next week. On my Lost in the Movies podcast, I wrapped up a 2-month double feature on Christopher Nolan by exploring Interstellar, and on my Twin Peaks Cinema podcast, I concluded a 3-month series called Traumatic Transformations by focusing on Greg Araki's film Mysterious Skin and its connections to Twin Peaks. On Patreon, after some delay, I released a surprisingly long updates podcast covering almost everything I'd watched, listened to, worked on, or received as feedback in the past few months, with a running theme of generations and eras tied to a project that I'm considering in the coming months. And it's anchored, amidst a bunch of shorter film capsules, by a longer discussion of the Apple TV series The Morning Show, which I discovered kind of by accident and found much more fascinating than I thought I would for its depictions of the zeitgeist and some odd similarities in a way to Twin Peaks and Firewalk with Me. I also republished some older pieces. As part of the Alan Fish Online Film Festival and Wonders in the Dark, I shared an essay on the great Iranian film The House is Black that I'd written originally for my favorite series. And on this channel that you're watching, my primary YouTube channel, Lost in the Movies, I uploaded my complete short film Class of 2002 for the first time. When it originally premiered back in 2013, it was in several chapters on here, with the full movie only available on another channel for technical reasons. So now I finally put it on my main feed. Hopefully within the next day or two, I'll also be sharing other Patreon rewards, including another updates podcast and several advance entries for my eventual Twin Peaks character series, so stay tuned for that if you're a patron or are planning on becoming one. And now, a taste of Queen of Hearts before I bring on Cameron. So I have with me here Cameron Cloutier, and we're going to talk about Queen of Hearts. So without further ado, I want to let you explain. First of all, let's just talk about what the film is, and then we're going to go a little more in depth into the process of making it, because that's sort of fascinating too. This was a long time coming. So first of all, what is Queen of Hearts? I think official subtitle is a Twin Peaks fan film.
Yes, for legal reasons, that's what it's called. It's basically the story of Annie Blackburn post season 2, and that is juxtapositioned against Cooper meeting Wyndham and Caroline Earle 5 years earlier.
Yeah, there's a sort of a dual narrative going on where we'll cut like sometimes even just a few seconds like of I mean, as it goes, a ways into the movie. For the first part, I feel like you do long sequences in each narrative, but as it reaches the climax, you're sort of interweaving these two stories.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about how this project came about in the first place and where it took you over these many years, since the return, through the pandemic, and now finally, what has it been? I guess for almost 5 years since you
Well,
conceived
we got
this, right?
no. Well, I came up with the story actually in late 92, 93.
Okay. Go way back.
Way back. And again, it was just a story. The idea was, so the original story that I came up with back then, and again, there was no season 3, right? And as far as we were aware, the Fire Walk Me was going to be the end of it. I saw obviously the scene of Annie Blackburn giving the message to Laura, and without having any background, knowing that it was originally supposed to be Cooper and they changed that, I just started thinking, like, Annie is this religious young woman who got out of the convent. For her to kind of bend time, bend space, bend, in her mind, God's will, to be able to go back in time and give a message to Laura, things have to be really bad out there. And I remember at the end of Fire Walk Me, when Cooper and Laura are in the Black Lodge and she's crying, looking at the angel, I kept thinking, this is very bittersweet because they're trapped in this kind of hell landscape. And yet they're safe in there because what's happening out there has to be far worse if Annie Blackburn is going to go back in time and give this message to Laura. So that was just kind of an idea of a story. I also thought it'd be really great to see Cooper, Wyndham, and Caroline, mostly because Annie was designed as sort of a romantic relationship with Cooper, but it was also a redemption arc for him because of what happened between him and Wyndham and Caroline. And then in the second season finale, when you saw Caroline and Annie wearing the same floral dresses, and there was no real explanation for it, I thought, wouldn't it be really great to tell a story of post season 2 Annie, why she went back in time to give this message to Laura. Again, juxtaposition that against Cooper, Wyndham, and Caroline, and build those stories back and forth until finally both women are looking at each other face to face wearing the same dress. And then it would continue on. I assumed it would continue on, obviously, to her giving the message to Laura. And that was basically it. And I remember telling some friends about this in high school because they said, oh, again, we had no idea that Frost and Lynch weren't working together anymore. But some friends had asked, hey, if you ever, were down in LA and you got into, what's called a pitch meeting where you go in and just kind of like throw ideas out to people. If you ever found yourself in a room with Frost and Lynch, what would you pitch to them? And I said, I would love to do like this story. And that was it. Never thought anything more of it. Always assumed that if I ever found myself itching to tell the story, I would probably end up writing it as a short story or something of that nature. So then season 3 gets announced, and I'm thinking, great, we're going to be dealing with the Annie situation here, and she gets name dropped in one scene, and that's pretty much it. I do think there's more going on there. I do think that the pages ending up in the bathroom stall have more to do with Major Briggs and that whole thing rather than Leland Palmer putting those pages in there. But that's another story. Um, but anyway, they didn't really get into it. Um, so I was like, okay, that's interesting. Uh, and then there was the final dossier book was going to come out, and I had seen there was a short film that came out right around that same time called The Summer Lake at Pearl House. No, The Summer House at Pearl Lakes. And it was a short, like 5-minute film about Leland Palmer as a boy. And I saw that, and it had been recommended to me, and I saw it, and I liked it, and I thought, well, now is kind of the time to do that kind of thing. I mean, there was all these like Star Wars or Star Trek fan films that were coming out, and I thought, this isn't how I wanted to make the film, but at the same time, I thought, well, this is the only way I'd be able to tell the story on kind of a big scale. And I thought I would just try it. My channel had grown quite a bit during season 3, not as much as most of the other YouTube channels, but still it grown quite a bit. Had pretty devoted following. So I threw out this idea of like, well, what if I made this film about Annie Blackburn? And people seemed to gravitate towards that. So I was really excited about that. And so we just kind of threw it out there as a potential crowdfunding. I actually contacted a few people involved with Twin Peaks Productions to say, hey, I just want to let you know that since we all have the same contacts, and we're all on the same social medias, and probably this thing is going to come across your feed, I would like you to know where I'm coming from, what I'm doing, why I'm doing, and just so you know, there's I'm not trying to rewrite season 3. I'm not trying to like say this is my way or whatever like that. I want to make something that's completely complementary to your work, and of course would just kind of be its own little thing for the fans. And I got a message back basically saying, yeah, can't wait to see it. So I was like, great. So obviously they can't like and retweet things, because then people would think that means that it's officially canon, right? But basically I got kind of a quiet nod of go ahead and make it. We'll look the other way. So I was really happy with that. But then the final dossier was coming out, and I remember thinking, oh no, this is where it's all going to fold, because I heard that Mark Frost was going to be dealing with Annie, and I thought, great, because my story has Annie out and about doing lots of things. So I was kind of worried when I got a hold of the book. People started sending me the chapters actually early before I got the book. People were JPEGing the chapters about Annie and Norma and all that to me early, so I could kind of get a heads up as to what was happening. And Mark Frost had written in the final dossier that Annie was really talkative on the first day of being in the hospital. And then she went quiet. And then she was just basically catatonic in the hospital for a while. And then Norma, put her in this like sort of like a little, like, I don't want to say a hospital, but more of like, kind of a caretaker kind of for, I don't know, I wouldn't say mentally disabled, but that kind of home. And, but it was, it cost a lot of money. So she had to franchise a restaurant and that type of thing. So I was like thinking, okay, well, Frost has her in the hospital like forever now. My Annie's going to be out and about, because my story had always had Annie out and about, because I never assumed that she was going to be in the hospital. So that's when I came up with doing
Wait, let me pause you there. So I'm going to structure this in a way, because I'm thinking about it. I think I'm going to present the first part where we don't talk as much about the sort of what happens in the specifics of like where you added a twist or something like that.
Yeah. Once we got the green light, we got the money for the crowdfunding. I kind of threw out a net like out to people out in the Twin Peaks fan community, because I thought, hey, we all did this thing, and it'd be great to have as many people as possible in the community come together to make this. And for whatever reason, I don't know. To this day, I still don't know. People got involved, people pulled out, whatever. But because people are so kind of tight knit in the Twin Peaks community, like when people pulled out, like it made other people like no longer like or retweet things, whatever. So it became very difficult to get anyone interested in the Twin Peaks community to like be interested in it anymore. which is kind of surprising considering it had gotten so much hype about it. And then, you could basically pin drop and nothing. So I knew I was basically on my own and I had to find other people, um, which then begins the thought of, well, do you get people who know Twin Peaks or do you get people who don't know Twin Peaks and then kind of, clue them in? I just basically went out and just found the right people. It took me a while. I had a son born, so that kind of set me back a little bit too. And then we finally got the project up and running. I would say June-ish of 2019. We started filming October of 2019. Did a lot of exteriors and stuff up in the Snoqualmie, North Bend area. Then we officially started November with Cooper and Caroline. And then we went all the way to March 2020 when we had to shut down for the pandemic.
Did you say November 2018 or 2019?
2019.
2019. Okay, yeah. So only a few months before.
Yeah. And so, but luckily we only had a week left to go of shooting.
Wow.
When the pandemic hit. If we had started in December and had a month left, we probably never would have finished the film because people were moving. People, the pandemic caused people to shift their lives about. So we got very lucky, and we managed to have a little bit of time in June before people left. And there was a little bit of opening in California where people could go out again. And so we took advantage of that week and we shot, I would say the finished film you see right now is 90% of the script film. 10% of the script had to go because of the pandemic. We lost locations. We had to change a few things around. And there's a whole set piece in the middle that got eliminated because of the pandemic.
Oh, we'll talk about that eventually.
Yeah, but we but we kind of knew this was coming. So we figured out ways to, so there weren't gaps, right? And I think if you watch the film now, you can't tell, so anyway, so we finished it, let's say summer of 2020, and then I finished the editing till around, I think it was January of 2021. And then once people were able to get vaccinated and stuff like that, then I started bringing people in to get ADR work done. And then we were gonna, it was always supposed to be one film, but because some of the effects were going to take a while, especially in the last hour and a half or whatever, I didn't want to say, okay, we said we were going to put it in 2021. Now it's going to be 2022. I felt like, originally we were thinking it was going to come out in 2019 or something like that. Here we are going to say 2022. So I thought I think we should just kind of cut the film up into not episodes, but acts, do the typical 5-act structure. And then that allows us to kind of not tighten it up, but, kind of get each act pretty much the way we wanted, put it out. And if there's any little adjustments that need to be made, we'll make those. And then when we release the full movie, it will be more or less what we complete. So that's kind of what we did. So we just released, acts 1 through 5. And once act 5 was up, 8 days later, yesterday, in fact, we dropped the entire film. It took 5 whole days to export and upload.
I want to sort of rewind a little bit and talk about you as a Twin Peaks fan, because this is the first time you've come on my podcast. I guess I've been on yours a bunch of times, but
yeah.
Tell us a little bit, first of all, about your history as a Twin Peaks fan. And then I want to talk a little bit about your filmmaking experience as well. But first off, your sort of induction into the world of Twin Peaks and how that went for you over the years and what went into starting Obnoxious and Anonymous and then eventually led to this film via that path.
All right. Well, when I was a little kid, I would see a commercial, Cinemax this Saturday night, Eraserhead, and they would show a clip of that. And then, but I remember the first thing of David Lynch's that I ever saw had to be in that opening scene of the Elephant Man, which scared me to death. I think I was 6 years old when it came on HBO or something. I saw the elephant and I saw the screaming lady. I was like, what is this? Then I saw about 10 minutes of Dune and didn't understand it. But again, I was 8 years old. Anyway, so when I was in middle school, a person who worked at the school said, oh, you like strange movies? Because at that point I was really into really crazy things that you would see, something wild, Five Corners. that kind of those kind of movies. And he said, "Oh, you should really see Blue Velvet." And I remember thinking, isn't that Romanian film that I used to see commercials for? Because I kept thinking Isabella Rossellini with that hair was like some like Eastern European, foreign film or something. He's like, no, it takes place in America. And I was like, really? Okay. So I belong to this like video club where it's like, you pay $1 and you get like 5 movies, that type of thing. So I sent off for it, and I watched it and I really liked it. And then of course I'd watch it again and again. And then I grew
Wait,
to
can I just intervene
yeah,
here?
yeah.
How old were you at this time when you sent away for Blue Velvet?
13.
Okay. Just checking.
So, and I really, really liked it. And so, of course we'd bring over friends or whatever, be like, listen, you liked Heathers, you're really gonna like Blue Velvet here. And so my friends and I were crazy back then. I mean, we would have like Kubrick weekends and stuff like that, so but then we heard that the show Twin Peaks was going to come out, and of course it's starring Kyle MacLachlan, and it's created by David Lynch, and it's going to be Blue Velvet just on TV. And we were like, what? This is going to be amazing. So the thing is that I missed it's going to sound funny, I missed the pilot. So I ended up watching the rest of the series. I didn't know what was happening, but I couldn't stop watching it. I think it had to do mostly with, yes, I like the performances and stuff, but I think it was the Badalamenti music. I just thought, my God, this is the most haunting, scary, most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I don't understand a frame of this thing, which always cracks me up when people would get like the VHS box sets in the mid 90s and say like, oh, I love it. I'm like, how can you love it? The pilot's not even there. So anyway, but I did really like it. And then that summer they re-aired the whole thing, so I was able to catch the pilot. But I recorded all the episodes, so I still have all the original recordings with the commercials. And it just became one of those things where you just for that year and a half, it was just the most magical time. And I know a lot of people say like Saturday nights 10 o'clock was the worst time to put on Twin Peaks, but it was great for me because I was 14, 15 with didn't have a driver's license. I wasn't going anywhere, so it was fine for me and my friends. And then that was it. The finale ended June 10th, 1991, and we thought, okay, well, I guess it's over. And we kind of just told ourselves that the story was basically a deconstruction of Cooper from innocence to corruption, basically. And we were like, okay, that's really sad and depressing, but okay. And then later that summer, we heard that they were going to make Fire Walk with Me, and we knew that because the TV Guide printed up the entire synopsis of the movie, even going so far to say that David Bowie is playing a time traveling FBI agent. So obviously Lynch didn't really care about getting the things out there then, letting the little Easter eggs out then. So and then of course we heard, while the movie was being made, that everyone had been cut out of the film. And then went to see Fire Walk with Me. I think there was 3 people in the audience besides myself, but it still played for 2 months in my town. That's why it was funny when I read Scott Ryan's book and he talked about how it only played like a week or 2 in his town. I'm thinking, wow, because it played 2 months in my town and nobody went to see it. But I went to see it a couple times, and over those 2 months, and but like that was such a magical time. Oh, when people say, what's the best time of David Lynch for you? I always say 86 to 92. Even though I love Straight Story, Mulholland Drive, and a lot of things, it's that magical time of Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, Wild at Heart, On the Air, Industrial Symphony. It was just a magical time to be a fan of his. And so, Fire Walk with Me came out, and then that was pretty much it. And I would say for the next 20 years or so, it was one of those shows that I would kind of go back to every 4 or 5 years. And like, I, always thought about it, but at the same time, it's like, you move on to other directors, other films, other TV series, whatever. But every once in a while, you just would go like, oh, Twin Peaks, that's just so great. And you would go back and rewatch it and be reminded about why it's so great. And, and I love everything about Twin Peaks, even the things everyone like hates about season 2. Like, to me, it's like, listen, Twin Peaks is finite. There's only so many episodes. Like, I'll take every second I can get, even if it's absurd. It's like, yeah, I can acknowledge like some of it isn't the greatest, but that doesn't mean that it's not well written, well directed, well acted. Did it need to be in there? Probably not, but it's still cool. Um, I'm kind of a Twin Peaks apologist when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I didn't really associate with Twin Peaks online stuff, David Lynch stuff online, because I always thought that was like kind of more like a personal thing, kind of like what you brought to is what you got from it. And so I just kind of stayed off, tried to stay off the IMDb message boards and all that. But then what happened is that I met Jennifer Lynch at a film festival, and we talked for a few minutes. We got along great. So I reached out to her when I was wanting to start doing interviews for my channel, which is called Obnoxious and Anonymous. And the reason why it's called that is because I used to make fun of the people on the Ain't It Cool News, IMDb message boards, Yahoo message boards, saying, God, these people are so obnoxious. And the reason why they can be is because they're anonymous. And so I thought, that's what I'll call the channel. But the joke will be that we'll all self-identify ourselves, like nobody will be anonymous. Which, that name has its pluses and minuses. Some people go, what on earth is this? But I think it's been around a while now that people kind of get it. But anyway, so I reached out to Jennifer Lynch. She at that time wasn't the prolific director that she had become, was yet to become. So she was like, yeah, cool. I'll totally do an interview with you. I don't think she realized that I had just been watching all the Kevin Pollak chat shows, and which is basically a free flow conversation, and that would go hours, like 2, 3, 4 hours. And so I was kind of like in that vein. And so I think she sat down thinking it was going to be like a 20-minute thing. And we ended up, I think it's still the longest interview she's ever done. It's like 2 hours long. And at that point, she even says, there's no season 3 of Twin Peaks coming out. So,
right.
it just,
what was that, 2013?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a year before. Tell me now about your filmmaking experience prior to Queen of Hearts, because you've been making movies for a while, I think, right? Now, are these features, shorts? I think some of them were horror films. Like, give me a whole survey of that.
I just one of those people who, I started as a short story writer. Then I started writing scripts, unproduced, but still, I grew up writing scripts. And then I did a lot of work with like media, news, that type of thing, shot a lot of court trials, worked a lot in true crime.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll get into that in a moment, but yeah, you have some experience in that.
There's a few, right. I mean, there's a few cases in particular that I've been deeply involved in. And then made a feature in 25. Well, actually I made 2003, came out in 2005, just online. And then like I don't know, I just like shoot whatever I feel like it. But the problem is I got stuck developing this true crime film for a few years, and it wasn't going anywhere. Nobody really was interested in it. Maybe now people would be interested in now that the killer has been caught. But I saw this documentary called Official Selection, and it really got into the weeds of like how much money you can put into like trying to release a film, and going to Sundance, and then you put up posters, and then people put posters over your posters, and it's just it's a big. Yeah. And then you got to like pay all these entry fees, and then
oh my God, it's crazy. The film industry is insane,
right?
It really is, and I've never penetrated beyond the furthest periphery of the periphery,
right?
And even I can see that. It's like,
so in a way, I was always like I want to make films, but, and I don't mean this to sound egotistical, but I always wanted to just make films on my own, like my own terms. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And like I've met filmmakers, I can't say who, but I've met filmmakers who say to me, like, I go, God, I really wish, I was in your position where, I could make this for, $1 million over that. And they've said to me, I really wish I could do what you do, yeah. which is basically just write and make whatever you want, and no one cares. So it's like, we're both like coming at it from an envious position. So I was like, okay, I really want to make films, but I don't want to like, go bankrupt, especially, if I have a kid and
wait forever for gatekeepers to give you permission. I mean, that's the nuttiest part to me of the whole thing. So, it's like, It's not even the endurance it takes.
Right.
It's the fact that it's not the fate. Your fate is not in your hands.
Right.
You have to hope other people like you and
Right.
whatever. It's crazy.
So anyway, so this idea of doing Queen of Hearts kind of checked all of these boxes for me, which was it's it's a fan film, so therefore I know people are going to watch it.
Right.
Right.
You've got an
Two,
audience.
two, I don't have to worry about making money back because I can't make any money on it. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So
Nonprofit officially, right?
right. It's a donation thing, so I don't have to pay back investors. I can make basically whatever I want and put it out there. And if people like it, great. Then maybe they'll fund my next project. Right. So this thing was basically like, let's do the best we can so that if I decide to do another project, people will be more willing to, help out. And it was great because it means like no film festivals, no entry fees. I just make it and put it out there for people. And so it's just kind of like this great thing. It was like, okay, let's make this film where I don't have to worry about, really anything except just making the best film I can make. And that to me is like, could you ask for a pure form of filmmaking?
So when you met with Jennifer Lynch, did you have a film you were promoting, or were you at the festival as like an attendee or whatever?
No, I was just attending. She was promoting.
Okay.
She was promoting Hiss.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
before she took her, I don't know. Did she ever take her name off it, or I don't know.
I've read a little bit. I haven't seen it. I've read a little bit about it,
Yeah.
and I feel like that may be the case. Like she got upset because they recut it or something without her.
Right, but at that time she was
oversight.
still 100% behind the film.
Okay.
And we were talking about, I remember because this is way before, the missing pieces and all that. And
Yeah.
we were talking about the Fire Walk with Me deleted scenes. And I said, are we ever going to see these things? And she goes, probably one day. And then she said, here's the thing. They're really great, but you can see why they were cut. And I said, okay. And now I've seen them.
Yeah.
And I go, I don't know why they were cut.
I
mean, some of them I understand. Some of them I understand. And
Yeah.
I understand theatrical time, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. But there are certain ones where you're
There's
like,
some great stuff in there for sure.
well, like for instance, like the film kind of needs a couple of them. One, Leland walking up to the door with Laura in the bushes at the end before James arrives. It's just because otherwise the theatrical cut looks like Leland Palmer's just been at home when she leaves. And we know from the series that he was at Ben Horn's office and placed the call to Laura. So that just shows that he's coming from somewhere. I don't know. Just to me, it's like, and it's such a tense moment with him like stopping on the stairs and her in the bushes and all. So I don't know. Anyway, there's just a few things. I think the longer above the convenience store scene kind of needed to be in the film, because I think in a cinema that would have been mind blowing.
It's hard to say. It's hard to gauge though, because they're all cut by Lynch in a different way than Mary Sweeney would have cut them. So it's like,
right.
What would this have looked like if it went through sort of her process,
right,
to get into the film as it was? Because as it stands, it's like, I look at it, I'm like, oh, I love this scene, but it doesn't fit the rhythm or the this or the that.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of stuff in Firewalk with Me that theoretically shouldn't fit the rhythm either. So to get back to where were we? Jennifer Lynch and Missing Pieces. Okay, so yeah, so you were talking about like filmmaking stuff. So you had one feature film around 2003-5. And then you were working on the one about, I guess, you didn't mention the name yet, but it's the Golden State Killer.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that in a little, maybe in a moment as well. Were there any other films that you had created between that feature and
I have no. I kind of stopped. I just started doing the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'd rather just like, I do want to make films, but I figure, a moment, was that line from season 3? The stars will align and a time will present itself.
Believe me, man, I know that sensibility quite well. And
I was like,
yeah.
eventually something, there's going to be a moment.
You've got to follow the flow. You can't force it.
And also Lynch has also talked about this idea of green lights, red lights.
Yep.
Like if you have a red light, don't force it, just take a break.
Yep.
So I just was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to just take a break. And,
And it led to a film in a way.
And it
Yeah.
did lead to a film. And I think that this film to me, if I could speak frankly, I think that this film is going to be an important for Twin Peaks fans. I think in the long run, I think, 5 years, 10 years from now, I think people are going to maybe watch this after, they've made it through the series and the movie and the missing pieces and the books or whatever. I think this is going to be one of those things that people just watch because they're so in the mood of Twin Peaks and they want more. And I also think this is a important, um, step for a lot of the actors. I think that they are incredible actors, and they needed to be in something that people would see them in. And I needed to make a film that honestly that people would see so that I could maybe make something else. I basically just wanted to make a film that was gonna be something that would benefit everybody. So
So let's talk about Maddie, who plays what was her full name? Who plays Annie?
oh, Madison Bates.
Madsen Bates. So she's the star of the film. She's also producer, and you in the beginning you give her creator credit along with yourself for the film, like in the sort of Twin Peaks green and brown font format. Which kudos for that. I've tried to create that font, and it's hard. So
Well, I didn't do it. My visual effects guy did it,
good for
but
he did a good job.
yes, he did a fantastic job. So she came on at a time where I could not get the film off the ground. I had a lot of things set up, and a lot of props, and I'd been collecting things, going, okay, this thing's gonna come together at some point. But by the time I met her, like, I wasn't available until like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night to get anything done. So I really needed somebody to help me out during the day to get a lot of things done. And so she was like, cool, I'll totally do it. And all she asked me for was, um, I would like to, because she's an actor, and she said, and we had another Annie cast at that time. And she was like, while we're setting up stuff, do you mind if I do some of the scenes so that I can put stuff on my reel? So I said, of course, absolutely. Well, anyway, that other Annie, surprise, surprise, didn't work out. And Maddie was just I say this a lot, but it's true. She had her hair up in braids a lot. She wore glasses a lot. And so I just saw her as that, producer kind of role, you know what I mean? But then she, very much like Clark Kent, took her glasses off, put her hair down, tried the dress on, and it was like, oh my God, like what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, he should have been Annie from day one. And she was like, I totally want to do it. But she had been so much in the producer role.
So she came on as producer. That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So she was
Right.
producer way back when we talked, probably.
No. No. I met her in 2019.
Okay. All right. So it
Yeah.
was later in the phase, but
It was later
still,
in the
like, she
phase.
came on as producer, not as Annie.
Not as Annie, and she stepped in only because it wasn't going to work out
Yeah.
with the other actors. So, but because she was so involved as being producer, what we did was we got everything up and running right the way we needed to, cast and locations. Obviously, little hiccups came along the way, but we would figure those out. But we shot most of the Cooper Caroline Wyndham stuff first, and then we transitioned to Annie, because then by that time the film was up and running. We knew everything what was happening, and so she could focus entirely on the acting part. And obviously, she helped out a lot of things in terms of, like, one of like Major Briggs's, buttons didn't work, so she'd be sewing stuff, and she'd be helping out with hair and makeup, and she did her own makeup, which of course, I mean, the blood that she did is fantastic, looks incredibly so realistic. And there were just so many things that she helped out with that, like, I when I was editing the film, I was like, if it wasn't for her, and me and her meeting at each other at the same time, this film would not have happened. Especially with the pandemic, I'm guaranteeing it probably would not have happened, and it certainly would not have happened in this way. So even though it was my idea and my script, and I felt like she helped me bring this film to fruition, just as much as I did, and so I put us both as created by.
Yeah, that's fascinating that that was her. So I wasn't sure about that. I was wondering if she like sort of blossomed from Annie into producer, or producer into Annie. It sounds like it was more the latter case.
She
I,
stepped in the role because we didn't have anybody else, and we were on location. We were in
yeah,
Snoqualmie, and I was like, "Well,
yeah,
what the heck are we gonna do?" Because our
yeah.
we had our Annie up there, and we were shooting, and we both looked at each other and said, "This isn't gonna work out."
No, she really brings like a gravity to it, and it's funny because I almost feel like Annie in the film has that kind. Like, I, eh, we're going to talk about this in a second. How
Mm-hmm.
this feeds off of like the Annie in the original series, and your
Mm-hmm.
kind of thoughts about her and that character. But she kind of almost brings more of a gravitas to it, I feel like, than the character had. And it almost is like that producer role comes through in the performance. Like Annie in the film, she's kind of a voice of like reason with all these other people who like, Major Briggs and the dean and all of those characters. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, they have the sort of the heart in the right place, but she has sort of like more of a practical outlook on all of it.
Well,
And obviously that's partly in the writing, how you wrote the
yeah,
character,
yeah.
but it really suits her style well. Like, and knowing that she was the producer behind the scene.
It's also just casting. I mean, it's like she I mean, obviously she's not Annie Blackburn, but there's a lot of aspects to Maddie that is Annie Blackburn. Because she even told me, she's like, I kind of feel like I was this character at some point. Um, so that definitely helped. And but in terms of like, she and I would have this discussion like, well, this isn't Annie that we see in season 2, and that's because this is an Annie who's come out of the Black Lodge. She's done putting on that. She was the new girl in town. She meets Agent Cooper on the first day. She's like, wow, this is a whole new life, and I'm gonna just be just really nice, cool person, and just not really think, and just kind of go with the flow and enjoy life and this that. And then she's like, oh yeah, I just got failed again. And so she's not having it anymore. I mean, when she says to Cooper, or sorry, Mr. C in the hospital, what do you think they were saying to me? You want to talk about meta, when she says like, they kept saying behind my back in Miss Twin Peaks that I'm nothing more than a replacement for Audrey.
Yeah, that was good. Talk
And
about meta, exactly.
it is meta,
Who
but
is Annie?
right, but it is meta, but at the same time though, it completely syncs up with continuity in terms of like, wouldn't they be talking about her behind her back? Like Cooper was all over Audrey, even at the dance just like a few days before at the hotel, when Denise was like there dancing with Andy. Cooper, everybody saw Cooper with Audrey. Cooper got in trouble for going to rescue Audrey, and now he's gonna be hooking up with Annie.
One of one of my favorite like minor character moments in Twin Peaks is like Trudy, the Robert Englund's wife, who played
Right.
Trudy the waitress at the Great Northern.
Right.
She got this great look in episode 5 where Audrey comes up and she's flirting with Cooper, and she kind of looks over like, "Oh, okay, I see what's going on here." It's like a great little like background character moment.
Sure.
It's totally, yeah, no, I agree completely. Like
So I
everybody
want
kind of saw this and
Yeah,
gave
so I
each other
want
knowing looks.
so it was kind of like it's a meta joke, but at the same time, though, no, that's really what would happen in that small town. Annie would be like, "What are you even doing here? Like, you just got into town. How can you be Miss Twin Peaks, right?" Um, and so this whole thing of like her snapping at Mr. C in the hotel room, or sorry, in the hospital room. Um, I say hotel room because in the original script it was supposed to be a hotel room. Um, that was before I knew she was supposed to be in the hospital. But it was supposed to be that whole scene was supposed to
Right
be,
before the final dossier.
yeah, that whole scene was supposed to be in Cooper's hotel room. Um, but anyway, but when she calls him out, it's like that's when you start to see that this Annie no longer is like what she says to Cooper in the season 2 at the bar. She's like, I'm stubborn, and he's like, oh, I can handle that. Well, now we're seeing that. We're seeing what she's really like when she tells Dean in the woods, like, I don't want a new boyfriend. Or at one point she says to Dean, like, have you been in the lodge? She's like, no. He goes, well, okay, be quiet. Because it's like I don't know. To me, I just felt like an Annie that just was not gonna put up with any shenanigans anymore because all these people needed her to do this thing, and she's just like, "You need me more than I need you." So make it make sense to me.
Tell me about the film project that you were working on a lot between your first feature and then getting back into Twin Peaks,
Right.
which was the true crime story involving the Golden State Killer, and I think particularly his last victim. And we've
Right.
talked about this in the past in a written interview, but let's give it its audio podcast form because it's quite a story. I think it involves
All
like
right.
Patton Oswalt's late wife and
Right.
all
So
kinds
this
of stuff.
so the killer has been caught by now, but at that time he hadn't been. So there were a series of crimes in California from Northern California to Southern California over I guess a 12-year um, uh, stretch of time, but at that point it seemed like it was only 10 years, but I guess it was 12, maybe 13 years now. But the serial killer had gone through all these attacks and all these assaults and all these murders, and then stopped in 1981 apparently, and then in 1986 he came back and killed one more girl and then seemingly disappeared forever until they caught him with DNA. So my film concentrated on the last girl, Janelle Cruz. Um, I was attracted to it because there was her story was so incredible. Just because she was like this young girl who had gone, been this very promising young woman, and then uh, she had been assaulted in her life, and then she you know kind of pulled her life together. She'd gone through like drugs and stuff, and she picked herself up and put herself together, and then confronted a serial killer. And even though she died, she basically her confrontation with him was so traumatizing for him as well that he never did it again. So I love this idea. So there are parallels between this film and Queen of Hearts, because that film that I designed was her story, but it would cut back and forth to a lot of the other crimes, and then build and build until finally they're both in the same hallway of the house looking at each other. So in a way, it's like, because I haven't been able to make that film Bird with a Broken Wing, it's almost like when I got to make Queen of Hearts, even though that this was always kind of the structure of it, I can kind of see that I believed in that structure before, because that's how I structured Bird with a Broken Wing. So I thought, okay, well, obviously I know that structure is going to work. So and in fact, Annie and Janelle are very similar, in terms of maybe Annie's not doesn't get into the drugs quite so much, but in terms of realizing that that not everyone's going to help you or save you. Sometimes you're gonna have to do it by yourself. And so I think there was a lot of parallels between both films. Anyway, so I wrote this film, Bird with a Broken Wing, and shopped it around. Nobody seemed interested, mostly because the serial killer hasn't been caught or wasn't caught at the time. So people were nervous about him coming back. And also people were really interested. The idea of sexual assaults, it's the film isn't explicit. It is kind of like what this guy would do. So, that's an icky topic for a lot of people. So, people weren't really interested in that. But now that he's caught, and there was documentaries made about it, and I
And he
made them
was a
the whole.
cop, right? The
Yeah,
guy?
yeah.
Crazy.
And like but it makes sense. I mean,
Yeah, I'm
because he would,
sure it does.
it makes sense because he would change his tactics by like what was happening. So like, when they figured out blood splatter 19, early 80s, he never did it again. He would change by what was kind of new.
Mhm.
Also 86 is when DNA started coming up. So
Would you
instead of,
rewrite if you wanted to move forward with this project, would you rewrite it knowing now who the killer was?
no, because it's not about him, it's about
Okay.
her. It's about her.
Interesting. Yeah.
The only thing I would change is maybe the postscript where it says he was caught. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
I think the postscript says, now, like, he hasn't been caught yet, but I think that's the only thing that would need to be changed.
But he doesn't come into it till really well. You said you
Well,
showed the other victims and stuff.
yeah, but I don't know who he was. You know what I mean? I just show some of the situations that
Sure.
happened.
It's about her though, not him. Yeah.
It's about her. So that was my idea, was like the ultimate kind of FU to the guy would be to make a film that chronicles his crimes, but make it really about her. And anyway, so there was a woman, Michelle McNamara, who was married to Patton Oswalt before she died. She had a little true crime blog. She and I became friends because of this case. She decided to write a book. She knew I was working on the film. And we kind of thought, wouldn't it be really cool if the police are doing their thing and she's writing her book and I'm making my film, that we could kind of come at it from a triangulated angle where basically the guy wouldn't have a place to run if we're coming at it from every form of media.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And then she passed away right before she kind of finished the last, I don't know, couple chapters, whatever.
Now, did she interview you or something for the book, or did you interview her for something? You had a conversation at some point about
Yes.
the case, right?
So she wrote this huge article for the LA Weekly, and there's what's called a writer's cut. I didn't know they made writer's cuts, but there's a writer's cut online, and I'm cited in the article. As like, I got all my information from Cameron for this section, which was cool. So she and I were just like interested in this case. And one time I was down there, like going around to a lot of the locations of like some of the crime scenes and where Janelle lived and stuff like that. And so we met up. She invited me over to her house. Patton Oswalt was in the home, and her and her daughter were there. And I said, listen, if we're going to talk, can I just set up the camera just so that I can just like have she said, yeah, go ahead. So we did. And it ended up being like one of like 2 interviews that she's ever done on camera.
Wow.
So, and again, it wasn't an interview, it was just a conversation. So that's why, HBO and 2020 and 48 Hours were like really interested in showcasing the material, because it's just her off the cuff, talking. But
yeah, there was like one big documentary, right, that featured your footage in it.
Yeah, the HBO
like a big
one.
HBO.
My wife like screamed. She was like, "Oh my god!"
You're in
like,
it.
Well, not only that, but my name's on it, my voice is in it. She's like, "That's you."
What's the name of the documentary? The HBO one.
I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
I'll Be Gone in the Dark. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't watched it, to be honest.
I got to see that.
Yeah, I haven't watched it only because that material is like so close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That like sometimes I can't watch stuff like that because I'll go. Not that I'll get upset about something, but like I don't know. I kind of like want to go into some things like fresh,
Yeah.
Anyway, so I still haven't been able to make that film, but I haven't tried, for probably a decade now. So I'm kind of thinking about like, what's the next project I want to do? I haven't figured that out yet. I have a few I'm interested in doing. That is definitely one of them I would like to do. So,
how old was that? Was she when she was killed?
18.
Oh, wow. So really, it's incredible similarities to the Laura story as well.
No, that's the thing. It's like Janelle is basically, if you took Nancy from Wes Craven's New Nightmare and Laura Palmer. So, and the fact that the Elm Street house and Laura Palmer's house look similar is not beyond me. So,
yeah. Well, you pointed me to some similarities. I think you mentioned specifically Nightmare on Elm Street 4. So to this day, the only Nightmare on Elm Streets I've seen are, the first one and then the fourth one, because I wanted to watch it for like
when you watch that
horror movie comparison to Fire Walk with Me.
When you watch that first 20 minutes,
totally,
it is Fire Walk with Me.
Totally.
I mean, when you see,
you're talking about the fourth one, right?
Yeah, so I'm saying the fourth one, because when you see Kirsten hanging out with her boyfriend, and it's literally Laura and Bobby in the hallways. Like it literally is them. Like you're thinking to yourself going, okay, like I know Lynch isn't probably watching this stuff, but other people are, because you don't get Tim Hunter to direct Twin Peaks without seeing River's Edge, and River's Edge is Twin Peaks. You know what I mean? Like it's
Right.
just,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, obviously there's definitely differences, but it evokes the mood of Twin Peaks very much. Um, there's just certain things that capture that. I look at something like someone like Adam McGowan who did the Sweet Hereafter. I go,
Oh my God.
that
I just did a whole Twin
right.
Peaks podcast comparison to Sweet Hereafter.
Oh
Like
yeah, well,
that film is
that is Twin
amazing.
Peaks.
Oh,
It
it's
is.
amazing.
It is Twin
And
Peaks.
it's like it's funny too because I put out I did like a patron podcast in the winter, and then this May I put it out public because I was like, it's the 30th anniversary of the Firewalk with Me premiere at Con, and it's the
Mhm.
25th anniversary of the Sweet Hereafter at Con, like same
Yeah.
time, you know?
Yeah, but when I saw Fire Walk with Me, I remember thinking, "Oh, I know why New Line Cinema distributed this because they're like, oh, this is going to be the art house version of Nightmare on Elm Street."
Yeah.
And if you notice, New Line Cinema no longer has the distribution in front of any of the releases of Fire
Well,
Walk with Me.
did they go out of business or something at some point? They're like a studio
Warner
I very
Brothers,
much
Warner
associate with the
Brothers,
90s.
Warner Brothers ate them up, but they still
Okay.
release things under the label. And but
Okay.
what's interesting for you Twin Peaks fanatics out there is that if you get the DVD of Firewalk with Me, the original DVD, or
Yeah.
you get the
That's how I
VHS,
first saw it. Yeah, on
you will
DVD.
you will get 10 more seconds of Lynch mood because of the New Line Sim logo. Without that logo, you don't get there's a storm wind that kicks on
Oh.
for the New Line logo that is not there anymore with it be gone. So if you are a completist, okay, I'm just saying that. And anyway, so
Also, I was just talking about this I did a guest appearance on another podcast about Firewalk with Me. We are talking about how we first saw it. And I first saw it on the New Line DVD in 2008. And it the audio in the pink room is up all the way. Like you can hear the dialogue, which is crazy because I that scene still blew me away, even
mhm.
though it wasn't as Lynch intended. But it's funny looking back on it now. It's like, no, like they artificially like pumped up the mix on the dialogue so that you can hear every line in addition to the subtitles.
Yeah,
Really weird. And they
that's
have that
funny.
documentary which you and James always used to riff on.
Oh yeah. Well, that's like the worst.
They just cut in like the middle of a line or something. It's so weird.
Don't get me started on that thing. I don't know what they were smoking because you have these amazing people giving interviews and you don't even let them give their thoughts out. You just
It's
start
like
cutting.
Kyle MacLachlan laughing for 3.5 seconds.
Anyway, there's that one on the moving through time. The other
That one,
is,
that's a good one.
I mean, yes, it's just kind of like camcorder setting up, but at least it's interesting and they let people talk. Anyway, so yeah, so maybe one day I'll get to do Bird with a Broken Wing. That is definitely on my list of projects I would like to make.
What to you is, if you could sort of summarize what compels you about, like what drove you to make this movie? Like you've talked about having the idea and how it developed over the years, but what was sort of the impetus and the thing that created this yearning in you to tell the story? And I guess we can include in this question also just the question of what drew you to Annie as a character, because I think those two answers are probably related. I know you were always a big Annie fan, and she gets a lot of criticism as being sort of a second-rate replacement to Audrey or whatever.
I don't think after my film's out for a couple of years, I don't think people are going to have that complaint too much. Because
give me all your thoughts on that.
I've already heard from people saying that this movie has completely made them reevaluate the character, which is fantastic but this is how I've always thought of the character. I always thought that this, again, I understand this is a fan project, but I felt like this Annie was always there. It's just that was afraid to come out because she was this new girl in town and she was trying to make friends, and she just met the most popular guy in town who seems to be interested in her. And by the, but then it just kept creeping in like, wow, he like completely lied to her and he's warning Audrey, Donna, and Shelley about Wyndham Earl like stalking them, but doesn't think to tell Annie about it, even though Wyndham Earl is following Cooper's every move. That would really kind of piss me off. So at one point in my film, she says, like, you didn't tell me about Wyndham Earl or Caroline, and because of that, my guard was down. And I mean, if she had known, maybe she would be looking out for Wyndham Earl's dressed up as the log lady. I don't know.
Well, I just gotta say, just to not to derail this, but the episode 28 scenario in which he's like, "Oh my God, Wyndham's going to kidnap whoever Miss Twin Peaks is. Let's go to the Roadhouse," and then they just fucking stand there and watch for like an hour or whatever as the whole. It's like it's so absurd. Like the
Yeah.
only thing, the only really positive thing I have to say about the Miss Twin Peaks episode is it's so goofy that it perfectly sets up the finale with like Lynch's comeback. But like
I love.
on its own terms,
Yeah.
like it drives me nuts some of the
Oh, but
stuff in that
I
episode.
love the whole like I love the whole like Annie winning and then the lights going out with the strobe
It's a
lights.
good plot development, but some of the ways it's executed just drive me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things in there. It's like, why is Lucy running around, jumping around when she's like supposedly pregnant? Like, it's like,
Although that's like my favorite part of it, her little dance.
yeah, her little dance. Anyway, so I really wanted to tell the story of Annie Blackburn, and I wanted to kind of follow a young woman from I don't want any. It's kind of the classic story of I don't want to be a part of this to yes, I'm going to basically not only do this, but I'm going to end up changing everything else. And then I wanted to contrast that, of course, with Caroline, but that would also get into Wyndham and Cooper and all that. And the Wyndham Earl storyline, which I love, at the same time, though, I know it gets goofed on a lot. So I wanted to show it before it was all about, Leo Johnson being electrocuted in goofy outfits and stuff. I wanted to show like what it would be like if they were partners in the FBI and they're both, at one point Caroline says to Cooper in my film, well, now that you guys are partners, we're both married to him. So that makes us married too. It's like, oh, okay. Like, bringing up that swinger image that you thought up earlier. So I just wanted to tell those two stories. I thought they were rich, especially with the idea from the Scott Frost book of Wyndham disappearing and then Caroline disappearing and then her coming back as a prostitute and then Annie reliving her past. I mean, it's just such rich material in there that I was like, this would be amazing to see.
So you actually answered sort of another question that I didn't even ask in there, which is interesting, which is why include the Cooper Wyndham Caroline material, which is, I mean, I don't know if it's half the film. It's certainly more than a quarter. It's like a good chunk of the movie is that stuff, which wouldn't naturally necessarily come to you if you were thinking, I want to tell a story about Annie and her whole trajectory.
Yeah, but they're both wearing the same dress in the final episode of Twin Peaks. And this whole thing of like, my husband killed me, Annie saying that, and then Caroline, it's like they took this idea of, okay, Annie is the redemption arc for Cooper for what happened to Caroline. So Lynch and the writers, and I know Lynch refashioned it a lot, but still at the same time though, it was there in principle, the idea of that Lynch started. I think that's when Lynch really started playing around with the idea of doppelgangers. He literally says doppelganger in the finale episode. And this idea that Annie is Caroline, Caroline is Annie, but they're not. I mean, they're not the same person. And yet there are similarities because they both fell in love with Dale Cooper. And there's a lot of differences as well. And Wyndham Earl, was married to one and kidnapped the other. And, so there's so many, even though they're four different people, they're all connected in so many ways.
I feel like you should send this video to the actress who played Caroline Earl. If
I've never been able to,
if she's on social media.
No, I've never been able to find her because I think that she would love this film.
Well, it's funny because she's such a Mark Frost creation. Like, oh, Cooper needs a haunted backstory. Like, I don't think that was something Lynch really thought about.
No.
And yet he ran with it in the finale. I mean, I think Caroline was in the script that they wrote, but like he uses her in a different way and he brings her, he has her there and he directs her. Like he's actually, I think I guess Yule Edel directs like the weird little superimposition flashback. But like Lynch is
but
really the
but
only
there's all
director.
these pictures out there of
Yeah.
Lynch taking the side by side pictures of Annie and Caroline
Yeah.
in the floral dress. So he was
Yeah,
he was very
exactly.
happy about it. And
Yeah.
obviously, and people go like, "Oh, he didn't like the Annie character." Really? Well, then if he didn't, then why did
Uh,
he give her the most important role in Fire Walk with Me?
right.
Season 3 didn't deal with Annie. The books dealt with Annie a little bit, but they left me these huge holes where it's like, okay, great. Well, I guess the universe wants me to make this film, because I kept saying to myself, like, if Mark Frost completely answers the Annie storyline, I'm not going to make this film, because I'm not going to make something that negates what they do, and it's got to be able to fit into whatever they, are going to do. And it was almost like the universe was like, here you go, go ahead and make it. Um, and so, yeah, here it is.
We're going to talk about season 3. We're going to talk about more about the film itself, get into some more spoilery territory that we avoided for the first part, and just talk in general about Twin Peaks topics in this back half. But before we get to that, tell people where they can find you, what other work you've done, and all of that stuff. So we'll end the public section on that note.
Well, in terms of Queen of Hearts, you can find us on Facebook. There's a private group, Twitter, Instagram, and then as for my own YouTube channel, Obnoxious and Anonymous, you can find us there. I'm basically looking to kind of rebuild the YouTube channel back up, because I spent so much time working on this
Mhm.
film that not that I've lost subs, but I've lost the interest,
Momentum,
the
yeah.
momentum of the channel. So I'm looking to kind of pick that up again, and then hopefully with Queen of Hearts doing as well as doing, maybe once I figure out what project to go and do next, then we'll get going on that.
And Queen of Hearts specifically, I'll mention this in the beginning as well. And I'll have a link on screen the whole time because I usually have a visual, even though it's an audio podcast, I have like a consistent visual that goes up. Queen of Hearts, they can find on the YouTube channel Annie Blackburn, right?
Correct.
Right. So we'll put that link in the show notes and people can find it there. And thank you, Cameron. And now let's carry on to the second part of the conversation. Something this film made me think about, and I really like, just to be honest, like I've hardly ever watched any fan films, so I don't have
Right.
great context for
Sure.
this. That's it for the public part of our conversation. You can hear more by joining patreon.com/lost in the movies for $5 a month. You'll also have immediate access to the back parts of all these Twin Peaks conversations so far, and upcoming ones too, as well as the $1 a month rewards, advance entries for my character series, and a monthly updates podcast. Plus, you'll get 4.5 years of an archive, including lots of Lost in the Movies and Twin Peaks cinema content that hasn't been made public yet, and in some cases isn't planned to be made public. And make sure to watch Cameron's movie Queen of Hearts if you haven't yet. The link to the full film, as well as its YouTube account for it, which we can watch the film in pieces or all at once, is down there in the show notes. Click on that link, and thanks for listening.